Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including former Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez announcing another run for Arizona's 2nd Congressional District. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Mary Jo Pitzel from the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com, Mark Brody from KJZZ Radio, and Howie Fisher from Capital Media Services. Panel, good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Mary Jo, we're going to start with you. Jonathan Nez says if first you don't succeed,
try again at least one more time.
Yes.
This would be Nez's second attempt to run for Congress in CD2, which is a big chunk of northeastern Arizona. He was a Democratic nominee last year. He lost to Congressman Eli Crane.
Yes, and I read, I think in the Republic, that he outperformed Kamala Harris actually in that district. So is there thought that Eli Crane is vulnerable? Is he doing it because he didn't think he had a strong enough, why is he doing it?
Well, I think he believes he's got a path there, but it's going to rely heavily on turnout on the Navajo Nation. I mean, yes, he led up there, and that helped, but against a Republican in a district that has, a congressional district that leans pretty heavily Republican.
Yeah, what do you think, Mark?
I mean, yes, he overperformed, but you'd have to really, really overperform as a Democrat in that district to win, because as Mary Jo said, it's a pretty heavily Republican district. And yeah, turnout, especially on the Navajo Nation, will be really, really important.
I think a lot of this is going to come down to what happens nationally. I think he's looking not so much at what he did, and I'm sure, he was certainly amazed by that. But if, in fact, this is an off year, the president's party is not likely to do as well. There's a lot of kickback over some of the things in the big, beautiful bill that people are finding out about. There's certainly the Epstein case and who's voting which way. Well, I know we'll talk about that later. I think his belief is there's going to be enough people who are fed up with the Republicans that they'll say, I'm willing to vote for a Democrat, or I'm not going to vote for the Republican.
And willing to vote for a Democrat among those Democrats voting in the primary, the eventual primary. Do you think anyone's going to run against Nez? Is there going to be other people showing up here?
I don't have a feel for that.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you've got the guy who won the nomination last time coming back, a little hard to knock him off. But we'll see if that works for Amish Shah, for example, up in CD1.
Right. Do you think he's going to get any?
That's a really good question. I also don't have a great feel for it, but he's a popular person in that area. I mean, he was the Navajo Nation president for several years. He did run, as we said, he overperformed Vice President Harris last year. So, maybe he'll get some opposition, but I mean, at least from the Democratic primary side, he seems like a pretty solid, strong candidate.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Eli Crane, Congressman Crane, did vote for the bill, and it's likely going to mean fewer people on access, lots more trouble up there in a district with a lot of rural areas. How much of a factor is that? Well,
it's tricky because if you remember, they played a game with this bill. Some of the stuff that's going to kick in, like some of the cuts to access and food stamps, kick in after the 26th election. It was sort of like a shell game there. So they may not see that. But I think they're going to see some of the other things going on. Even in terms of the immigration enforcement, I think that folks who clearly wanted the borders sealed have seen enough in terms of what this means in terms of hanging around courthouses and schools and everywhere else. And to the extent that Eli Crane is linked to that, and to the extent that maybe even the farmers and ranchers there say, wait a second, these are families that have been with us for years, and you're deporting them? I think that's going to weigh heavily on the party.
I think it'll be incumbent on Nez and his supporters to get that message through about what's in the bill that that the Congress passed and the president signed earlier this month. Because as Howie said, there's a delay on it actually taking effect. But if you can sort of foreshadow what this means, and there's all kinds of predictions about what the cuts to Medicaid will mean, but it's having the message and the money to get the message out, and the money will probably be a challenge for a Democratic candidate.
And one of the important pieces of what's in that bill is going to hurt rural hospitals, because it's not just that people are losing coverage, but that in fact some of the reimbursement rates and the underlying subsidies are down. You're talking a large rural district here, And if the threat suddenly comes down, if the people who run the Winslow Hospital or the Holbrook facilities or even up in Flagstaff say, we are in danger of closing, that really works.
And that brings up something that we hadn't talked about in a while, and that is uncompensated care and how Arizona hospitals, that used to be a big deal, not so much anymore, could be a big deal again.
Yeah, I mean, the hospitals say it's going to be a huge deal, and Howie's right, especially in the rural hospitals that have a larger Medicaid population. They are still required to treat patients who come into their emergency departments. So if there are people without any kind of insurance, Medicaid or otherwise, who are coming into these hospitals, the hospitals have to treat them. That's just money that they lose.
Let's keep on the campaign trail here, Howie. Fundraising for the governor and the AG race. Let's start with the governor's race. What are we seeing here? You reported on this.
Well, let's start with the fact that the governor has a Hoover vacuum where she's just sucking up money like crazy. I think she's over, approaching $5 million right now. Again, no primary foe helps. What's interesting is watching the battle between Karen Taylor Robeson and Andy Biggs. Now, Biggs was late to get started, so he didn't have a lot of money to start with. He did pick up a little more in the second quarter, which ended on June 30th. We just got the reports now. But he didn't raise quite as much as Karen did in the same quarter. Now, he also, however, has $50,000 left over from when he was in the state Senate. Money's just been sitting in the bank, which he can now use on that. Now, Karen Robeson has $2.2 million of her own money. Now, this is a woman who spent close to $17 million of her own money to lose to Kari Lake several years ago. I tend to think about the Brewster's Million movie of how do you spend so much money to come up with nothing at all.
Again, the fundraising right now is rather curious in that Karen Taylor Robeson is so much self-funded. But Congressman Biggs is getting some Turning Point, some PAC money. I mean, it's coming in from all directions.
Yeah,
here.
I mean, Turning Point's going to be a huge booster for Biggs, both in messaging and in fundraising. So you can't look at just what the candidate themselves has raised, but also some of the outside money that'll be coming in.
Yeah, and let's talk about Biggs, and let's talk about this vote. I mean, the idea of subpoenaing the Epstein files, it was an 8-2 committee vote here, and among the two people who said, let's not do it, was Andy Biggs.
He was one of them, and to Howie's point earlier, we were just talking about, it'll be interesting to see, how much that plays into we're still a while away from any votes being cast, even though we're talking about it right now. But if it is still an issue at that time, what sort of the public opinion is and whether that will seem like a good vote that Biggs took now or a troublesome vote that he took now.
And to go back to talking about Nez in Congressional District 2, I mean, he and Crane are at least on the same page. They have both said that the Epstein files should be released.
Yes. Crane says yes. But Biggs says, I mean, is that something that comes back during debates, during the campaign? I mean, you said you wanted it, now you don't want it.
Well, okay, let's assume that you've got the candidates that's sitting in here, next June or July ahead of an August primary. What's on the agenda? We have this, the head of Tulsi Gabbard saying, I have found the Obama smoking gun. I'm not sure that I particularly believe what she's put together, but is that the issue that is facing voters? Is it Epstein? Because I think Epstein's not going to die. Got a judge in Florida who refused to release the grand jury transcripts. No big surprise there. And now you have people, the president saying, I want to release all relevant information. But we also found out that FBI agents were put on overtime to look for Trump's name in DOJ files. So how long does this bleed? I don't know.
Well, and the difference, obviously, is that one of these individuals is the president of the United States. Another is no longer the president of the United States.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty significant difference there. And, there's been a lot of talk, is President Trump trying to deflect? Is he trying to distract? Is he trying to do this or that? It'll be, to Howie's point, it'll be super interesting to see how that's still playing out there. But I think what is safe to say is that regardless, Mary Jo is right, that no matter what the campaign finance reports say, it seems as though, at least to some extent, money is not going to be much of an object in this primary because Karen Taylor Robeson has a lot of it, and Andy Biggs will have a lot of it from Turning Point USA. So both sides will be adequately funded to do what they need to do.
Attorney General's race, what are we seeing there?
Well, talk about it's good to have money. Rodney Glassman, who's an attorney in private practice, who is a perennial candidate, if you will, has run as a Republican. Heck, I knew him when he was a Democrat running against John McCain. is once again trying to get a public office, so he's putting in $1 million of his own money, which certainly gives him a leg up over Warren Peterson. Warren Peterson is Senate President. He has some money left over from prior legislative campaigns, which he can carry forward. But Peterson has the benefit of being an incumbent, of basically a full-time person at the Senate who's pumping out his name all the time, and that sort of earned media there. But Glassman, I think he thinks this is his last hurrah. If he can't do it now, remember, he came in second in the primary last time around against Abe Hamida. So he figures, okay, Hamida's out of the way. He's off in Congress doing whatever he's doing. He says, wait, it's my turn to be the nominee.
Peterson?
I would never say it's his last hurrah.
Well, you may be right there.
But as far as Warren Peterson and his tenure here as president of the Senate, does he have a lot to run? I think in the Republican primary, he does have a lot to run on there, doesn't he? General is a different story, but the Republican primary, that's an inside track, is it not?
Well, you mean in terms of name ID? Or
Just in terms of everything, Mary Jo.
I mean, yeah, he can talk about, look, we worked on this bipartisan budget, it's a balanced budget, it does this, this, and this, and can talk about some of the other more conservative bills that did get through and got signed by the governor. But, in the big scheme of things, the Senate president, the House Speaker, they're known maybe by the title, but people don't necessarily associate names with those individuals. But this is an opportunity to build up that name ID.
Do they associate the legislature with that individual?
That's a really good question, how much anybody knows who their actual legislator is. But what I think it'll be interesting when you talk about the bipartisan budget and bipartisan bills, I wonder how that plays in a Republican primary. I mean, he was fending off accusations of being a rhino just, a month or so ago when they were working on the budget with Governor Hobbs.
Could someone from the right tiptoe into the race?
I mean, that seems like the lane maybe Rodney Glassman would be trying to drive in, but I mean, it would not be a shock to see that line of attack coming from the Glassman campaign.
Rodney Glassman from the right.
Well, again, like I say, he ran against John McCain. Who knows where Rodney is today? Let's see, what time of the day is it, kind of thing. But there's another thing about Warren Peterson. He does get publicity for the things he does. He recently filed papers in court. Back in 2022, the legislature approved these quote-unquote refundable tax credits for people who make films here. Bipartisan bill. Now, he didn't vote for it. It's being challenged by Goldwater, and all of a sudden, here's this press release put out by his paid press aide from the Senate saying, I'm filing an amicus brief to say these are unconstitutional. So he's trying to burnish his right wing also to say, look, I am the protector of taxpayers.
Please.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that the law was passed in 2022, and I forget when the Goldwater suit was filed. It's still active, but geez, I wonder why we're seeing this amicus brief, at this point. And it's clearly, as Howie said, it's to point to some of what he sees as his conservative bona fides.
But again, as far as the general is concerned, the general election is concerned, do Arizonans want to hear that you're the guy that killed a tax credit that keeps movies from coming here?
I mean, AG, well, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, especially some of the movies. I think Howie reported on the movie about the Granite Mountain, the
Granite Mountain Hot Shots.
Mountain Hot Shots. That was about people in Arizona that was not actually filmed here, especially when the state has a long film history way back now, so recently. I mean, it would be kind of surprising to see that as a big issue in the AG's race, but it might be something that, to Mary Jo's point, that he could say, hey, look, I'm looking out for the taxpayers here.
Well, there's another piece of this. We're talking about running against Chris Mays, who won by a whopping 280 votes, who, of course, is putting out, she's sued 25 times. She and 20 of her favorite attorney generals have sued the Trump administration, mixed bag of successes and failures. I don't know what the public attitude is going to be, to the extent that she is seen as the anti-Trump, which gets us back to the congressional race. Is that a good thing? To the extent that people see her as simply wasting time and trying to protect things that may be less popular, whether it has to do with abortion or has to do with transgender or birth certificates, that's a harder mix.
Yeah, one more campaign thing here before we get to some other things. Chandler Mayer, we talk about Chandler races all that much, but a familiar name is running for Chandler Mayer?
Well, yeah, Representative Jeff Wenninger, who came back to the legislature this year. I think he said he was on a sabbatical, but he'd been term limited, so he sat out for 2 years. And he really made a name for himself coming back as a tenured lawmaker with his support and advocacy for the Diamondbacks bill, which is funding improvements to Chase Field. But he wants to get into the mayor's race. He thinks that things are just operated a little too loosely there in the city, and is going to finish out his 2-year term in the legislature and try to jump into the mayor's seat.
And trade spots with the current mayor of Chandler, which is the really fun part about, tell you what, I've got such a deal for you. Now, I don't know that they organize it that way, but the Chandler mayor is under question in terms of whether he's even serving legally, so he figures, I'll go to the legislature. Hey, there's a vacant seat here.
What does it do to the Republican caucus at the legislature, provided, of course, that stays in Republican hands?
Oh, well, it's hard to tell. The Republican caucus has always been sort of disorganized anyway. You've got a few people on either side that are driving it. When Andy Biggs was there, in the Senate, he drove it a certain way. Russell Pierce. I don't know. What's been missing for the last couple of years have been moderates. The moderates tend to get killed. They tend to get voted out. People like Bill Kopenicki and things like that. And so I don't know how well moderates are going to do.
Well, if Kevin Hartke, who is the current Chandler mayor, wins a seat in the House, I mean, he won't be joining the Freedom Caucus. I mean, and Wenninger is not a Freedom Caucus member. They're conservative, but they're not Freedom Caucus conservative.
So pretty much straight across then.
I mean, the only thing that could potentially be a difference is that second House seat from that district, because this is a fairly competitive district, relatively speaking, and the other House member is running for the Senate. So there's potentially an open House seat there. And it has been held by a Democrat not that long ago. So if Democrats find the right candidate and under the right circumstances, it could potentially be a pickup for Democrats, but it also could go to another moderate Republican or a Freedom Caucus Republican or pretty much anybody.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of chairs are being shuffled around over there from a distance at least.
And that's why we keep watching it.
Yes, we do. Okay, Howie, we had pro-Iranian hackers getting into the second. Who knew the Ayatollah was a candidate for Arizona office?
Well, the question of residency, as they will tell you, is in the eye of the beholder. Look, after the bombings, I think that there are folks in Iran and some of their allies who are looking for somebody to lash out at. So they're looking, like all good hackers, you look for the weak points in the system. You can see, what can I get away with? And all of a sudden, here was the Secretary of State's candidate web portal, not the election materials, not where the votes are kept, not where the registrations are kept, but where the candidates file and put up their pictures. Hey, guess what we can do? Sure enough, they did. Sure enough, it was found. Now, the Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, says, remember, I've been asking for all this money for security, you didn't give it to me. And then, of course, you have the people who are running against him, like Alexander Kolodin, who's busy saying, look, it's all your fault and you're hiding something. And he says, where's the money that I asked for?
Yeah, voter registration not affected here. No. Actual results not affected. Campaign registration, signatures not affected. A lot of things weren't affected. But again, just the fact that he got in and apparently was trying to get in again numerous other times, maybe trying to get in now, as far as we know.
This was described as a very sophisticated hack because they were very persistent, whoever these actors are, and they believe that they're associated with Iran. It's important to note that, like the voter registration database and the address confidentiality site on the Secretary of State's office website, those are on separate servers. So those servers were not infected or attacked. But they did find a vulnerability with this candidate portal, swapped out the photos, which I guess somebody in the public saw it because they called somebody at the Secretary of State's office to report that. I wish we had been able to catch a screenshot.
It makes you wonder who was looking at that page, for goodness.
Well, and where the picture showed up was on the election results page, which, who's looking at election results in June? I mean, there were no results.
The Ayatollah won.
Yeah, I guess he won. But they shut that down pretty quickly. But they're still investigating it, trying to figure out where there are other vulnerabilities. And meanwhile, you have the secretary asking the legislature for a pretty immediate infusion. He wants $10 million and then an ongoing $3.5 million to update very very old equipment.
And that's really important.
How likely is that going to happen?
Well, that's what's really important, because you have his foe, Alexander Kolodin, in the legislature, who is fiscally conservative in the first place, and if he blocks it, and then we get another hack, you know, whose fault is that? And that's really the crucial thing. Anytime you're an elected official, particularly a Democratic elected official, is looking for money in an election year from a Republican-controlled legislature, it's tricky.
Is this going to hurt Fontes, do you think?
I mean, it's certainly not a good look, if nothing else. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, Kolodin will certainly, I would imagine, or anybody else who comes up in this race will, I'm sure, bring it up among other complaints they have with the current Secretary of State. I mean, if Fontes can get out in front of it and say, look, this was just a very brief one-time thing, nothing, you know, here's all the things that were not affected by this. I'm sorry that everybody had to see the Ayatollah's picture on our website, but it'll be an interesting, again, it's so far away from the election. Who knows what's going to be on voters' minds at that point?
It just feels like a conspiracy theory seed.
Oh yeah,
doesn't it?
I'm sure we will see that talked about a lot, you know, in the 2026 election.
Maybe even see that picture.
Yeah, and you know, Fontes tried to get out in front of it, you know, by saying, look, you know, this is because the legislature for 3 years, you know, has not, you know, given me money to fix these systems. So whether that'll sell with voters, and we don't know, you know, where the next hack attack might come from.
Howie, Justine Wadzak is apparently looking for representation.
Yes.
Are you an attorney?
No, but I play one here.
I think that's good enough.
That may be good enough. I'll have to ask the federal judge about that. Justine Wadzak was a state senator who, according to Tucson police, was traveling 71 miles an hour down a 35-mile-an-hour zone along Speedway near the U of A. She, of course, denied it. She also said, well, I'm racing home because my Tesla's about to run out of a charge, and if I go real fast, it won't run out of a charge. We'll leave that little bit of electronics aside. She identified herself as a lawmaker. They didn't give her a ticket at the time. They gave her a ticket afterwards because of the issue you can't cite people during the session. She ends up pleading out to something where she ends up doing to traffic school. End of subject. No. She is suing the city of Tucson and the police officer and the mayor and everyone else, insisting there's a vast conspiracy. Case is supposed to go to a federal judge next Tuesday. 2 days ago, her attorney files a paperwork saying, I'm withdrawing without my client's permission. Now, he is precluded legally from telling us why. It leads to a lot of speculation, but there are ethical rules about when an attorney has to withdraw, and we're waiting to see where that is.
And it's not just an attorney, Mark. This is Dennis Walensky. This is a guy that is, you know, no shrinking violet here. I think if he's got something by the throat.
I mean, he's an attorney that I think people who are not super paying attention to politics and law will have heard of, yeah.
I have not kept up with the case, but why is a speeding ticket in a federal court?
It is a civil rights violation. No, see, she's taking care of the ticket. Now,
Yeah,
she is
that's
filed.
over and done
She
with,
said,
yeah.
she says she decided once the ticket was done, we figured if you've got a half a brain, you leave it alone. No. She figured, I lost the election because of this. And so she said, my civil rights were violated, and I want $8 million worth of damage.
Let's get back to the half a brain part. How much do you need to think that the entire city of Tucson, along with, you know, the police department, the courts, everyone is out to get you?
Well, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people are not out to get you. But the fact is that she has this conspiracy theory, and she wouldn't be alone among the 90 lawmakers that all of us know in thinking that there are things going on. There are people still arguing, you know, the 2016, 2020 elections. She is convinced that somehow she was set up. She doesn't deny speeding. She said, oh, I wasn't quite doing 71. Maybe I was doing a little less. She's guilty. So how do you prove that somehow they targeted her?
I mean, is there any indication that they were targeting her? Where are we going here?
I mean, without seeing all the evidence, it sure doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like an officer pulling, even if she was doing 65, that's still almost double the speed limit.
I don't think she had a license plate that said, you know, Senator Wadzak.
Yeah.
You know.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence to suggest there's this vast conspiracy, but that's why they have court hearings.
So what's next with this, Howie?
Well, there was a hearing on Tuesday, and the judge, who was a little surprised by all this, directed Mr. Wolenschek to say, look, you will serve your client. I don't think he's going to show up in court. He may send somebody from his firm, but directed Ms. Wadzak to be in court. Judge wants to know why suddenly, less than a week out, are you having problems with your attorney? Now, I don't know. We'll be sending one of our colleagues down there to find out what happened. This is in federal court in Tucson. But we're all waiting to see what she has to say. Is this some ethical violation? Is it a question of financial disputes or anything else? We don't know. And again, based on the ethical rules, Dennis cannot tell us. He cannot say. He says, I'm precluded, attorney-client privilege.
It's just very interesting. The entire thing is just very interesting.
Well, what do you think has kept us in journalism all these years?
I just wonder if Justine Wadzak still has a future in politics. Does she have a future in politics, Mary Jo?
I think it depends on where she lives and what seat she seeks.
And that's important. She's in Gilbert now. She gave up on Tucson after being defeated in District 17. She's now living in Gilbert. She has not yet announced, but every time I send her a note saying, so what are you running for? Sort of, nothing, just, she's not denying it, not admitting it, but I don't think we're done. I don't think we've seen the last of Justine Wadzak.
What do you think, Mark?
I mean, that seems like a reasonable suspicion here. I mean, I don't honestly know, but
right.
I mean, it would not be a shock to see her run again for something.
All right, if she does, we will cover it here on the Journalists Roundtable. Good to have you all here. Thanks for joining us. That's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.